Hello and welcome to another edition of Professor Speaks. My name is Alex Hernandez. This is Dr. Craig Stern. And for our topic today, we wanted to talk about Hurricane Maria, Puerto Rico, and how this affects the pharmaceutical industry. And we certainly feel terrible about what's happened in Puerto Rico. I almost said it with an accent right there.
Yeah, impressive.
But we certainly feel terrible about it, and we will provide links as to how you can help out with the efforts there to get their island back up and running. But for our topic today, we wanted to talk about how this affects the pharmaceutical industry. In the early 90s, just popping out my handy dandy notes that I did my research on. In the early 90s, there was a federal government has how you say brought back a tax incentive for corporations to move their business down to developing territories. One of those developing territories was Puerto Rico, and a large amount of pharmaceutical companies moved their manufacturers down there. And what it did was there was about 50 some odd factories. It promoted 90,000 jobs, and about 25% of maybe 25%. We're still not sure on that number. But around a quarter of our drug imports come from Puerto Rico. And now that they're left with no power, no food, there's no jobs going on right now, FDA is probably going to have to go back down there to recertify some of these manufacturing plants. What we want to know is, what does this do to Americans who use these drugs daily? What does this mean?
Yeah, Alex, that's really important. Let me just quickly identify something that happened when we saw what happened in Texas and Houston and Corpus Christi. If everybody gives a little bit of money, just a little bit, and everybody gives something, then there's a lot of money available in order to help these people. And we just offer the fact that you don't have to give a lot, just a little bit, but if everybody gives a little bit, then we're in good shape. All right, now back to your question.
Right.
You're right. There are and were significant tax incentives that Puerto Rico did as a territory in order to bring pharmaceutical manufacturing and device manufacturing to Puerto Rico. The companies gave tax incentives, lower tax rates for the companies to be there, and they gave a $5,000 tax incentive for every employee that was brought on and employed by these companies. And with 50 different manufacturing operations, there's a lot of people, a lot of pharmaceutical manufacturing. It probably represents somewhere around 72% of their total exports. So it's huge in comparison to Puerto Rico. From the standpoint of everyone else in the United States, on the mainland, etc., we have the other problem, and that is it isn't clear exactly how much of the pharmaceutical manufacturing is going on in Puerto Rico, somewhere between 20 and 25%, probably close to 25% of their U.S. exports. And it's drugs such as Crestor that's used for hyperlipidemia, Prozista that's used for HIV, and Humira that's used for rheumatoid arthritis. So they're very big, well-known drugs, as well as totally separately devices that are very common in the industry as well.
Life-saving drugs.
Life-saving drugs. Yeah. They're important drugs. Well, even before Dr. Gottlieb became head of the FDA, there was moves to try and make sure that if there was a national disaster, that there were plans in order to try and keep these plants on board. And Dr. Gottlieb has followed up on that in order to try and make sure that that happened. Very importantly is the issue that these plants have backup power. So presumably, but there's a lot of discussion right now, there is backup power to keep these plants up and going, presuming that they didn't have devastation to the plant itself.
Right.
However, the people that work there can't go to work because their personal lives have been disrupted to such a great degree. So every one of the major manufacturers has gone in and sent in teams and tried to help all of their employees so that the employees can work.
Yeah.
So that you, in fact, can not just power the plant, but also have the resources, the workers that you need in order to make something happen. Well, having said that, there is a possibility that there will be a shortage of many of these drugs here in the United States, and in case also some devices.
Right.
Now, in the case of the three I just mentioned, there are options. I mean, we're not pressing anybody, but we are identifying that there are options. Option number one is, in the case of Crestor, there are other drugs, including generic drugs, that are being used to treat hyperlipidemia and do so in a very effective way, from simvastatin, atorvastatin, etc., to deal with it. In the case of Humira for rheumatoid arthritis, there's also other drugs like Enbrel and others to treat rheumatoid arthritis. And finally, Persista is only one of many drugs that are being used to treat HIV. So there are
Right.
alternatives. We're not driving people to it. We're just identifying that if in fact there is a shortage and people need it, then they need to address it. It may also occur that many of those plants have generic manufacturing going on or devices, and as a result of that, they may need to take a look at options in order to ensure. Right now, Dr. Gottlieb at the FDA and each of the manufacturers from Amgen and J&J and Eli Lilly, et cetera, have all said they don't think that there's going to be a big disruption. But getting power and everything up in Puerto Rico is going to take somewhere around 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
So it may be an immediate problem that isn't an issue because there's enough backlog, but there may be a problem over time that does that. And that may be where we have to address it.
Right. And when you mentioned the drug shortage, I mean, I know Dr. Gottlieb, right?
Yes.
He had mentioned that there may not be a shortage or may not be need to panic at the moment. And we're not certainly saying that people should panic. We're just saying, what does this actually mean for the American public as far as drug shortages? Does this mean our drug prices that are already high in comparison to other countries, is it going to go even higher? That's probably their main concern.
And they could. And they could. If someone is taking a branded product and they want to move them to another branded product, yes, it could. It could very well. The hope would be that it's maybe somewhere in the range of a 5 to 10% cost increase if it were to happen.
Right.
On generics, it could mean that generic costs could go up. The hope is that people aren't taking advantage of this and trying to take advantage of the situation, increase prices, but it is a free market, and as a result of that, there is the possibility that anything could occur. One of the issues that is an important one is that the companies went to Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, as a territory of the United States, has to follow all of the FDA guidelines for good manufacturing practices. So when the FDA inspectors went, they were looking at plants that would be similar and following the same GMP, good manufacturing practices, as would happen in a plant in the United States, in the mainland United States.
Right.
On the other hand, if they go to other countries, then they are using the same criteria, but they're always looking to see were they compromised in some way that would make them less than what those criteria are. But in Puerto Rico, they have it. So now the question is, have those plants been compromised such that they cannot meet appropriate guidelines with regard to the quality of the product, sterility of the product, labeling of the product, etc. Because there's a lot involved. There's the manufacturing, there's the bottling, the distribution, and of course the plants and shipping out of Puerto Rico have been stopped right now. So it's not easy, even if you made the product and got it boxed up and bottled up, to get it off the island in order to get it to mainland United States or anywhere else for that matter.
Right. Well, now that we covered that part, I mean, let's shift over to the health plans. Well, what does this mean for when a health plan has a very select list of drugs to choose from? Say one of the drugs is on there and there's no alternative on their formulary. What happens then when a patient is trying to get that drug from their pharmacy?
Well, depending on what goes on, health plans may have to expand their options for a short time.
Right.
If the current stockpiles are enough to take us through the next couple of months, then the immediate problem doesn't occur and health plans don't have to change.
Right.
On the other hand, if over a term and it takes 3 months, 6 months or longer in order to bring this back, then health plans may have to expand their formulary options. They may have to deal with more prior authorizations. They may have to address the fact that some of their costs may go up if there are exchanges or shortages that can't do it. And that's not just drugs again, it's devices as well, and devices cost.
Yeah.
So it isn't just one product or one thing. There's a lot involved here. And they may have to then expand what they're doing so that people get more choice. It may not be according to their current rules, but everybody has to remain flexible in what's going on in across the board, even in places like Texas and Florida and the rest, where there's been such devastation. It may mean that the regular delivery mechanism isn't there. So there has to be some opening for health plans in order to make sure that the pharmacies, the physicians have the opportunity to prescribe whatever's available in order to try and get it. So that's another option. It's not identifying that everybody has to move there. We're just trying to identify that we're living in a world where there have been so many devastations in such a short time that it requires a lot of flexibility, and that flexibility will impact what goes on. The good news may be that there's enough of a stockpile. On the other hand, if there isn't, then options are critical.
Right. And we did cover that topic when we covered about when the Hurricane Harvey and Irma first approached the U.S. and Texas and Florida. We were talking about how in devastated areas without power, how they were able to get the drugs to people that actually needed it, like in remote places like in Alaska. We mentioned in that. We covered that a couple weeks ago, so feel free to go ahead and check out that video. But also staying with the health plans, there was a big, in the news, there was a big break that just yesterday it was announced that Graham-Cassidy Bill was now taken off the table. So now we got to look at what does this mean for the American people themselves. With those that don't have coverage, oh, bless you.
Yeah, pardon.
Those who don't have coverage at the moment, what does this mean for them? Like September 30th was the deadline for Republicans to find a repeal and replace. So now that it's off the table, what can Americans do, or what are they supposed to do?
The hope for everybody, everybody, practitioners, non-practitioners, lay public, etc., is that Congress will get to work to deal with the fundamental problem of ensuring that the insurance market stays viable, that there is a insurance that is broad enough in order to deal with all marketplaces, and then to attack the problem of increased costs, because clearly there are changes that have to occur. In that regard, clearly drug prices are a major issue, whether it happens or whether it doesn't. And clearly there's arguments on both sides, whether it's health plans and PBMs that are saying they are controlling costs, whether it's pharma that many believe is the total source for it. As I've said in prior ones, without doubt, pharma is involved, PBMs are involved, health plans are involved, but it's simplistic to think that just one group is involved in this. Everybody's involved.
Right.
So one target will be drug prices. All of the subsidies that are supposed to be paid to the health plans need to be released so that they're paid to the health plans, so that the health plan marketplace stays stable. There are issues with regard to the taxes on devices that are part of the Affordable Care Act. They're still in place. Those need to be collected so that you can dissuade some of that cost. But at the end of the day, people are going to have to come together to come up with bipartisan solutions to this, understanding that no one will get everything they want.
Right.
Hopefully, the American people will get some of the things they want, most notably that all of those people that have health care will continue to have it, and health plans will deal with that. in an affordable way,
Right.
and that issues with regard to the cost that people pay will have some sort of a cap to it, and that will require a lot of negotiation and argument, but hopefully Congress will finally sit down and do the job that they were hired to do,
Yeah.
which is effectively to do that. The real problem is that there are very polar opposite designs on what's going on. Aside from Republicans that don't want to expand government and don't want to spend government money, and Democrats that want to expand healthcare and then find ways to cut the cost of it, there's very complicated measures here about how do you address that, and fundamentally issues with regard to that's already going on in the industry, irregardless of what's happening with Republicans and Democrats and everybody, of moving from volume to value, paying for performance, pay for a drug when it works, don't pay for a drug when it doesn't work. There's a lot of complications on how do you make that work. The drug companies say, well, I only have one dose, one shot at it, so you can't amortize it over a long period of time because I only have one thing that I can do, and that's when I do it, it either works or it doesn't work, and you're asking me to pay for it when it doesn't work, but I only had one shot. I don't have a chronic therapy where they're getting it day after day, week after week, etc.
Right.
On the other hand, health plans and the government are asking for them to look at value and to pay for that. These are very complicated issues, and people are going to have to work them out as to what they do. But at the end of the day, the Graham-Cassidy was yet another attack on what went on, and maybe it would have been an improvement, maybe it wouldn't, but the fundamental problem is that if everyone is not covered, then we have to address the fact of what do you do when someone who is not covered gets sick or hurt, and how are you going to address that? Because then the money comes out of everyone.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the Affordable Care Act led to a significant expansion of Medicaid programs. So the government's already there.
Yeah.
The government's involved in state Medicaid. The government is involved in Medicare. So there's a significant issue here about how do you address all of these programs, and how do you address it in a way that private insurance can maintain a viability at the same time the government and state deal with it as well. That's clearly kind of wide-ranging on the topic that you've asked, but it's a wide-ranging problem. And people are going to have to look at this in multiple ways, and there's no silver bullet. You can't just cut down the cost of drugs and that solves the problem. You can't cut down the cost of laboratory tests and that solves the problem.
Or hospital fees.
Or radiology fees or something, and all of a sudden that solves the problem. There is no simple solution to it, and there's no silver bullet that's immediately going to make everybody happy.
Right. And it might just take more government to try and regulate some of this.
It may.
Yeah.
It may.
Well, that's all we got for you today. We will provide links to help Puerto Rico in their effort, and we will also provide any information you may need if you just ask it down in the comment section. Like September 30th was the deadline, so I believe that ACA is going to start registration again, right?
They are.
Yeah, so they will start. If you need insurance and you're not sure where to go to, please ask in the comment section and we'll provide the link for you. And yeah, we'll have a new video next Wednesday. Please visit propharmaconsultants.com. Feel free to visit our RxInfoX page. It's free information about wide-ranging issues on healthcare. And we will see you next week.